Here's a question nobody in the solo leveling fandom seems to ask. What if Sung Jin Woo's greatest enemy isn't the monarchs? What if it's the version of himself he decided to become the moment he walked out of the double dungeon? We spend so much time analyzing his power scaling, his shadow army, his fight choreography, and almost zero time asking why he operates the way he does, why he pushes people away, why he trains past the point of reason, why even at the height of his power he still moves like a man who expects to lose everything. That's not strength. That's not stoicism. That's a trauma response, and it's been slowly dismantling the things he claims to care about most. Today, we're going deep. Not a recap, not a power ranking. We're doing a full psychological and literary autopsy of Sung Jin Woo's coping mechanisms, and why the manhwa frames them, quietly, as a form of self-sabotage. Title card drops. Section 1. Establish the baseline. Who was Jinwoo before? To understand what broke, you first have to understand what existed before the break. Pre-double dungeon. Sung Jin Woo is fascinating precisely because the narrative gives him almost no screen time in that state. And that omission is intentional. We get fragments, glimpses. A young man ranked E-class in a world that measures human worth by magical output. Someone who hunts in dangerous dungeons not because he's brave, but because his mother's medical bills require it. A person who smiles, who jokes with Jinho, who operates within a social world. The literary term for this is the antecedent self, the version of a character that exists before the inciting trauma, used as a measuring stick for everything that comes after. Chugong gives us just enough of antecedent Jinwoo to feel his absence. Because here's what that pre-trauma Jinwoo was doing, psychologically. He was engaging in what developmental psychologists call interdependent coping. He was surviving with people. His motivation was relational. Keep mom alive, protect the people around him in raids, stay connected to a social fabric even while being dismissed by it. That's important. Write that down. Because the Jinwoo we spend most of the story with, he's running the exact opposite program. And the double dungeon is the hinge point. Section 2. The double dungeon as psychological rupture. Let's talk about what actually happens in the double dungeon. Not the plot mechanics, but the psychological architecture of the event. Jinwoo watches his entire raid party die. He watches people he was responsible for, people who trusted the raid's structure to keep them safe, get systematically killed. He himself is beaten to the point of death. And then the system appears. Now here's where most analyses stop. And then he got strong. End of analysis. But let's slow down. In trauma psychology, there's a concept called the shattered assumptions theory, developed by psychologist Ronnie Janoff Bullman. The idea is that traumatic events don't just hurt us. They destroy 3 core assumptions we unconsciously carry. 1. The world is benevolent. 2. The world is meaningful and controllable. 3. The self is worthy. The double dungeon annihilates all 3 for Jinwoo simultaneously. The world is clearly not benevolent. It constructed a death trap disguised as a raid site and let civilians walk into it. The world is not meaningful or controllable. Jinwoo did everything right and still watched people die. And crucially, the self is not worthy. Because the central lie Jinwoo tells himself afterward is that he should have been stronger. That weakness was the moral failure. That last one is the dangerous one. Because when trauma rewrites your self-concept around inadequacy as the cause of harm, the coping mechanism almost always becomes eliminate inadequacy at any cost, become invulnerable, become self-sufficient, need no one, lose no one, which sounds like a hero's arc. And the manhwa absolutely frames it that way on the surface. But underneath, that's a trauma script. That's not healing. That's armor. Section 3. The 3 self-sabotage patterns. So let's identify the actual behavioral patterns, because this is where the literary analysis gets specific. Compulsive autonomy. Jinwoo almost never asks for help, even when help is available, even when the cost of not asking is catastrophic. Think about how many times Jinwoo enters situations alone that he doesn't have to enter alone. He has an entire shadow army. He has allies. He has, by the later arcs, enough political capital to mobilize resources. But the default mode is always, I'll handle it. From a narrative craft perspective, Chugong codes this as competence, and it is competence. But it's also something else. It's a man who has unconsciously decided that relying on others creates the conditions for loss. If nobody fights alongside you, nobody dies alongside you. If nobody is necessary to your survival, their absence can't destroy you. Psychologists call this compulsive self-reliance, a hyper-independence that isn't strength but is actually an avoidance strategy for intimacy and vulnerability. The self-sabotage. Jinwoo progressively exits the human social world. By the later arcs, he's barely legible as a person to the people around him. He's a force of nature wearing a man's face. Emotional numbing disguised as discipline. This one is subtle, and it's where the manhwa does its best literary work. Watch Jinwoo's interiority across the story. Early on, even post-Double Dungeon, there are moments of genuine emotional texture, grief, humor, affection for his family, hesitation. As the story progresses, those interior moments become increasingly rare. His narration flattens. His reactions to extraordinary events become minimal. He processes the deaths of people around him with what the narrative frames as composure, but which reads, on close examination, as dissociation. There's a key scene, and I won't name it specifically to avoid spoiling, where Jinwoo learns devastating news about someone close to him. His reaction is quiet, controlled. He moves on quickly. The manhwa frames this as strength. But here's the literary question. Is composure under grief always strength? Or can it sometimes be evidence of a nervous system that has learned to stop registering loss because registering loss is no longer survivable? The DSM-5 lists emotional numbing as a core symptom of PTSD. It's not a feature. It's a wound that's learned to look like a wall. The self-sabotage. Jinwoo is increasingly unable to access the emotional resources that would allow him to actually connect with his mother, his sister, the people he claims his strength is for. He's protecting them from threats he can defeat, but he's already lost them to a distance he created himself. Redefining worth through power. This is the deepest one. Remember the shattered assumption. The self is not worthy. Jinwoo's psyche answers that wound with a counterproposition, I will make myself worthy through strength. If I become strong enough, I cannot fail the people who depend on me. If I cannot fail them, the double dungeon can't happen again. It's a completely logical response to an illogical trauma. But notice what it does to Jinwoo's sense of identity. He becomes entirely predicated on function. He is a protector, a weapon, a system. His value is conditional on performance. Philosophers call this instrumental self-worth. Your value is tied to what you produce or prevent, not to what you are. And it's a deeply unstable psychological foundation because it requires constant revalidation, which is why Jinwoo never actually stops. There's always a stronger enemy, always another level. The system feeds this perfectly because the system is essentially a literalization of his trauma logic. There will always be a higher rank. There will always be inadequacy to close. The self-sabotage. Jinwoo cannot rest in what he's achieved. He cannot locate himself outside of his function. And the terrible irony is that the very thing he's trying to protect, his humanity, his relationships, his selfhood, is being consumed by the process of protecting it. Section 4. What the manhwa actually says about this. Here's where I want to push back on a reading I see constantly in this fandom. Jinwoo is perfectly written because he's just cool and op. Respectfully, Solo Leveling is doing something more interesting than that. And I think the fandom undersells it. Chugong makes a deliberate choice to give Jinwoo's victories an increasingly hollow texture as the series progresses. The emotional payoffs get shorter, the human moments get rarer, the narrative camera spends less and less time in Jinwoo's interiority and more time observing him from the outside, as other characters do. That's a craft decision. You don't do that by accident. The manhwa is, I'd argue, quietly asking, what does it cost a person to become the strongest? Not in terms of battles or enemies, in terms of self. Compare Jinwoo to Cha Hae-In in the later arcs, specifically in how she functions as a foil. She is strong, she is disciplined, but she retains her emotional accessibility. She reaches toward Jinwoo not despite her strength but through it, and Jinwoo consistently doesn't quite know how to receive that. That contrast is not incidental, it's the author pointing at the wound. The tragedy of Sung Jin Woo, and I use that word carefully in a story that doesn't frame itself as tragic, is that he succeeds. He becomes strong enough. He protects what he set out to protect. But the person who wanted to do the protecting? He's been slowly replaced piece by piece by the process of becoming capable of it. Section 5. The psychological framework. Post-traumatic growth versus post-traumatic adaptation. Let's land this with the framework that ties it all together. Psychology distinguishes between two trauma outcomes that can look identical from the outside. Post-traumatic growth, where trauma becomes a catalyst for genuine expansion of self, deeper connection, richer meaning. The person integrates the experience. Post-traumatic adaptation, where trauma is managed rather than integrated. The person builds functional systems around the wound rather than healing it. They perform well. They cope effectively. But the original rupture is still there, compressed and load-bearing. Jinwoo is a masterclass in the second category. He has adapted with extraordinary precision. His response to the double dungeon is effective, by every external metric. He does not fall apart. He does not quit. He becomes, quite literally, the most powerful entity in his world. But adaptation is not the same as healing. And the manhwa, if you read it as literary text rather than power fantasy, is full of quiet signals that Jinwoo's foundation is adaptation, not integration. The question Solo Leveling never fully answers, but always implies, is this. When the fighting is over, when there is nothing left to protect against, who is Sung Jin Woo? Does he know? I want to be clear about something before we close. None of this is a criticism of Sung Jin Woo. It's not even a criticism of Solo Leveling. If anything, it's an argument that the manhwa is richer than it's given credit for. That underneath the incredible art and the power progression and the hype moments, there is a genuinely complex psychological portrait of a person trying to survive an unsurvivable experience and making choices that are completely understandable and quietly devastating. Trauma doesn't make people weak, it makes people adaptive. And sometimes the adaptations that keep us alive are the same ones that keep us from living. Sung Jin Woo is not broken. He's a man who built an extraordinary machine to house a wound he never had the chance to tend. And maybe that's the most human thing about him. If you want to go deeper on this, I've linked the Januf Bullman paper on shattered assumptions in the description. It's genuinely one of the most readable trauma psychology texts out there. And if you're interested in how other manhwa and anime handle trauma integration versus adaptation, drop a character in the comments and I'll put together a follow-up. Like, if this kind of analysis is what you want to see more of, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next one.